Warning, warning, warning. Your Nintendo Switch is a threat to be hacked. It can be hacked regardless of the firmware you have. Warning, 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 warning. Hey everyone. So, a group out there called Team Executor is claiming that they can hack your Nintendo Switch regardless of what your firmware is. Interesting, right? Because we had heard up to this point that the Nintendo Switch was hackable up to firmware 3.0.0. There was a conference out there where a group of people got together and said, look, we have this method for hacking the Nintendo Switch that works with any firmware that's 3.0.0 or under, and anything after that, their methods just didn't work. It was a software level hack. This is the most common hack you see of video game consoles, because anyone could do it. You just need their files or their codes and their keys, and you use usually it's through a piece of software, a video game, and you're able to run an exploit through that game to gain access to the back end of whatever platform it is, in this case Nintendo Switch. And this allows you to end up loading things and booting things like homebrew, custom code, and all of that great stuff that people like to take advantage of. And that's basically it. Now, obviously, we know that, the scary side, the reason that so many people are against the hacking of systems is because it can lead to piracy. We can't ignore the fact that one of the major pitfalls of hacking a system, especially for Nintendo, and this is why Nintendo wants to stop it, they don't care if you're loading custom backgrounds or adding music to your system. That's not really what Nintendo cares about. They care about the people that are using it to play games, usually ROM versions of games from Switch, on the platform without having to buy the game. So that's really what Nintendo worries about, and it's something that has run rampant in the past. When PSP got hacked, the people were playing pretty much the entire PSP library without paying for it. It became an issue. It was an issue with the DS, both with hacked firmware and flash carts in particular. Nintendo won some lawsuits over the flash carts, and Nintendo now pays like I believe it's $10,000 to hackers for finding exploits and reporting them to Nintendo and proving these exploits are possible. Nintendo gives them money for that, like a finder's fee, so Nintendo can patch it out. And obviously the currently known methods don't work after 3.0.0, so Nintendo has been patching out the currently known methods of, essentially hacking your Switch. But Team Executor is claiming something extremely interesting, and we need to talk about it. They are claiming that they can hack your Switch regardless of what the firmware version is. It says, and this is, I quote, "This solution will work on any Nintendo Switch console regardless of the currently installed firmware and will be completely future-proof. This is the solution for opening up CFW, aka custom firmware, on the Nintendo Switch. We want to move the community forward and provide a persistent, stable, and fast method of running your own code and custom firmware patches on Nintendo's latest flagship product. And we think we've succeeded." And then they included a clip here, I'm going to throw it up, where they show their supposed hack running on Switch. Now this, to me, doesn't prove that it's actually that their claims are true, because we don't know. There's no way to confirm what firmware. We just see them boot up the Switch. You see the Team Executor logo, and then it goes into the normal Nintendo Switch boot up and home menu. We don't know what version they're running this on. We don't have any evidence that they could do this on any version of Switch. It's not running on the latest version. They don't show it running on multiple different variations of the hardware or the software. So we don't really know that their claims are true. But here's what we know about Team Executor. They've been around for a while. And what they are known for, and why there's some truth potentially to these claims, is they do hardware mods to hack systems, which obviously work around all the software and even affect the boot up of the system before the OS can even be loaded. So regardless of what OS Nintendo puts on it and what updates they make to it, this loads before that. So what they do is they take a board, a little chip, and they solder it basically directly into the system, into certain parts that make it boot up before the OS can boot up, and then you have full access to everything that system can do. You can, the big issue with this, and one reason why Nintendo doesn't like these hard mods either, is because it allows people to access everything on the platform. So forget, giving people access to things like allowing them to preload homebrew and all this other stuff and allowing them to run, pirated games. You can also find exploits that do not really exist or aren't findable normally through when the OS is already loaded. But if you find the exploits behind the OS, you can then use them across the board. You can have people hacking their switches and even infecting other people's switches through glitches that wouldn't normally be able to be found, since you wouldn't be able to access the hardware level to see that exploit specifically. It's a major concern. And I gotta give a shout out here to fellow YouTuber Spawnwave, who I watched his video on this topic all the way through because I knew that he had some experience with hacking systems, in particular doing hard modded hacks. He mentioned how he used to do it with his Xbox 360, and he actually, used Team Executor's boards and would solder them on and gain access. And this isn't new. Team Executor's been doing this for a long time. They kind of blew up with the original Xbox. And the Xbox 360 is really where they found their ground, and they've done it with several other platforms. But they don't always follow through on their promise, right? They said a while back that they were going to do basically this exact same thing for Xbox One and that they were close, and it never released. We're still waiting on the custom hardware, the custom, board modification to access the back end of the Xbox One. And now they're claiming that this is going to be arriving around spring 2018 here, and that they've done it. It's there. It works on every firmware, which of course it does, because it's at the hardware level. But until we actually see this out there, it's just them saying they did it. We don't know how applicable this is to being on a mass-produced scale. Now, for anyone worried, this isn't going to be too big of a concern for Nintendo themselves, because one, we're talking about hard mods, right? There's not going to be, probably less than 1% of people who actually own Switch are even willing to take a board that someone says them, open up their Switch, and start soldering different wires on there and everything. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you could really mess up your Switch. And because you opened it up, it voided the warranty. So if you mess it up, you don't just get a new one. You have to go out and spend a whole other $300 right now to buy another Switch. Or maybe you could find one used somewhere, eBay potentially. I don't see too many used ones out of GameStop or Best Buy right now, but it's possible you might see some used ones later. But it's still one of those things. They're going to be expensive. People don't want to mess up their Switch like that. This is why people prefer the software method, because basically if the software method fails, it's whatever. You could just back out and everything usually goes back to normal. Or if something gets messed up, you can reflash, there's a way to reflash the OS back on there and just basically reset your Switch back to factory default and just re-update it and you're fine. So the software one's a lot less risky. That's why people prefer the software mods. But the software mods are the easiest to eliminate. Now, Nintendo can combat these hardware modifications. The Xbox 360 actually tried to do this many, many times. Essentially, you have to make alterations to the board. So if they make this board that works directly with the current Switch, if they keep altering the board, that specific board might not work with the newer boards, and they would have to keep developing newer and newer boards for the different types of motherboards being used inside Nintendo Switch, and that delays it and just makes it take a lot more time. There's also, I've heard, that they can put different transistors in there that potentially, if you hook up another board to it, can overload the transistor and it would kind of pop, which is not something you want to hear about because, again, that ruins your Switch. But if it ruins your Switch, obviously you're going to be less inclined to even try this modification in the first place. Now, that doesn't mean some people won't take advantage of it if and when this becomes available. A majority of people that probably are interested in this aren't going to do the modification themselves. What they are more likely to do is to send their Switch into Team Executor, pay them, a sum of $200 or whatever for the board and the labor, and they will do it for you, so it's professionally done, and then send it back to you, and it should, theoretically be working. But again, you're talking about, almost doubling the cost of Switch to get this done. How many people are going to be interested? I don't know. I have never personally done a hardware mod myself, but I did own a modded 3DS at one point that was hardware modded, and this was for the purposes of video capture. So it wasn't to hack the system, but I basically bought a brand new Nintendo 3DS XL, and I had a company add a modification capture board to it, which modified the hardware, but it didn't give me any additional access. It just allowed me to have a video output to output it to my computer so I could do live streams or record footage natively off of the 3DS. Same thing that we can do with Switch. When you dock it, you hook it up through a capture card. Well, this basically was the capture card, but natively on the system. Really, really interesting, but it also costed me $200 in addition to what the system costed itself, plus shipping. So it wasn't cheap. In fact, it's one of those purchases that I even questioned if it was worth it, since I ended up not using that capture card as often as I want. So this is a very interesting thing out there. It's not something that should concern Nintendo to a great deal, but they need to still modify their boards and do things to combat it, because mostly for protection of owners that aren't using it, because it can be used to find little glitches and exploits that you might not otherwise be able to get if you have to access everything through the OS. So it's a little bit dangerous, but Nintendo has a way to combat this, because other companies have combated this in the same way. It wasn't just until recently the PlayStation 4 kernel was finally hacked, and the PlayStation 4 has been on the market forever before they finally got access to it, and that gives potential to load Linux and stuff. And it would be cool to see Linux running on Switch. Imagine some of the possibilities. We know there's 4 cores in the Tegra X1 chip that are not even currently being used, because it comes with 2 separate CPU cores in there. There's like the A57s and the A52s, and the 52s aren't even running. So it would be cool to like add Linux and see if you could get all those cores to run. And I don't know how that would impact games on Switch, but that's kind of the fun of hacking. Like, there is a fun point to hacking where you're not really trying to illegally port in games and do anything illegal. You are allowed to modify your Switch, but playing games that you didn't pay for through ROM modifications are generally considered not, maybe legal gray area at best. But there's so much more you can do with it, right? You want a web browser on your Switch that's accessible and not necessarily this behind-the-scenes thing that we have seen accessed. You want something like Chrome. You want to run Google Chrome. Well, if you can get Linux running, you can get Google Chrome up and running. You could end up running, PC games on the thing. Theoretically, whatever's can be ran on a Tegra X1. So it's a really interesting thing, and I'm curious what you guys think about all of this, about the Switch having a hard mod hack that was probably going to always exist at some point, and the various uses of it. Is it something you guys are interested in? How do you guys feel about hacking on Switch? How do you feel about homebrew? Homebrew is obviously one of the most popular things in Nintendo systems and the hacking community, and all the various things you can do with that. Let me know. My personal stance is obviously I've always been kind of against the hacking of a system for purposes of playing games, because I feel like anytime you're doing that to play games, you're potentially doing something that's in that legal gray area, or just flat out illegal. But if you're doing it just to play around and see what the hardware's possible of, you want to actually see what is the maximum you can push the Switch before it overheats. These are the kind of things you can do by modifying it and gaining that hardware access and loading something in before the OS boots. So, I don't know, you guys let me know what you think about all this. I just find it highly interesting. As a tech enthusiast, it's really cool just to imagine that there is now a way, like almost 100% guaranteed way, assuming that they actually hit their mark and release this when they say they will, that we could, benchmark. We could benchmark the Switch. That's what excites me, is actually seeing what is the maximum capability of what the Switch could potentially do. It doesn't mean that we're ever going to see that potential, but it would be cool to see that from my perspective. But then there's the part of me that's like, yeah, but a lot of people are going to use these exploits and these hacks to just play games illegally, play Switch games illegally, and that's just not something I can support personally. But I don't know. You guys let me know what you think about all this. Anyways, folks, I'm Nathaniel Robojets from Nintendo Prime. If you like this video, you know what to do. And if you dislike the video, hit that dislike button. Subscribe for more content. And you know what? I will catch you in the next one.